Welcome back to Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. I'm your host, Mario Bedouin, and today's episode is a special one, guys, because we're bringing back a favorite voice on the pod, someone who's got the inside track on the intersection of music, live events, and the global travel economy. That's right, Alex Mack is back with us, our go-to live music and event strategist. If you caught our previous conversation, Alex brings unmatched insights, some bold takes, and yes, including that Drake versus Kendrick debate, which we never really resolved on his side, and a deep understanding of how music festivals shape and are shaped by travel trends. Alex, we're thrilled to have you back. Last time you were here, you're a little under the weather, but still dropped some gems. This time around, you're coming in hot and just in time. We're kicking off festival season here in 2025, and there is so much to unpack. From the return of Ultra Music Fest in Miami to Lollapalooza selling out in just hours, the live music scene is booming. And the travel patterns around all these events are even more telling. In this episode, we're diving into how streaming has reshaped lineups, how Gen Z is curating its own festival culture, and what it really takes to build an experience worth flying across the country for, or the world. From Coachella to the Sphere in Las Vegas, we're breaking it all down with Alex. So buckle up, whether you're a music superfan, a travel strategist, or just looking for the next can't-miss event, this is an episode for you. Alex Mack is back. And as always, follow us on all the socials at Tix2, that's the number 2, Travel Pod. And obviously, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts because Tickets to Travel starts now. Welcome to Tickets to Travel, the business of travel experiences. I'm your host, Mario Bedouin, and we are back. We are back with Alex McClellan, our good friend and also live music strategist. Alex, welcome back to Tickets to Travel.
Thank you for having me back, Mario. Really excited to be here and get a second chance. Last time I was feeling a little...
You were probably sick because I opened up with the Drake versus Kendrick conversation, and you pulled back a little bit. I think you really wanted to go hard because I did call you out. You were this like big Drake fan, and then all of a sudden you're Kendrick. Anyway, we don't need the other.
I'm gonna be provocative here just to start the episode. Drake might be back. Nokia's slapping, to be honest. He's done like 150 million plays on Spotify in 6 weeks. That's pretty good.
I mean, if UMG lets him do it, yeah, you're right. He is doing pretty well.
Yeah, suing little bosses is never an advisable strategy. But anyway, it's like your brother that goes to rehab and you just want him to get healthy because you remember all the time playing blocks with him as a kid. That's what I want. I want him to win.
That's an interesting analogy that Drake is your little brother and you're playing. Anyway, I see where you're going with this. I do. But welcome back. We're happy to have you. As I start to look at travel in general and we start to look at the summer, people think about music festivals, obviously. And we're here. What is it? We're the first week of April. It's amazing. Oh, we have not great weather here, but an amazing lineup coming up of summer festivals. But we started out with this first quarter of the year, just some amazing shows at the Sphere in Las Vegas, obviously. And as we start to talk about festivals, we had Rolling Loud, we had Ultra Music Fest, Miami Music Week last week. What are some just initial thoughts of these first couple of festivals that have come up here in 2025 season?
First off, I think talking with Ultra, really incredible celebration for them. It's 25 years in Bayfront Park. Huge accomplishment for any festival to make it that far. It's quite difficult to do. I think overall, they did an excellent job this year of having strong headliners at the main program, but then they flushed out Miami Music Week probably to a degree which they never had. It felt like they were activating, of course, all the main places, the big clubs, the great hospitality venues, but they also were doing a ton of pop-ups and using a lot of Miami's new creative spaces that have emerged off the back of like the Bitcoin boom of the early part of this decade. I thought they were really successful in curating a very desirable experience. They managed the rain this year very well. And they put together two of the coolest moments I have personally ever seen at a festival. One was Skrillex's big return.
Of course.
For a decade, I think was the last time he headlined. And the other one was a very fun surprise where Afrojack and David Guetta joined stage together and they brought out Sia and they played Titanium together for the first time live ever in history. I couldn't believe it. I just was watching it and I was like, wow, imagine you're there with your best friends, having the time of your life, and all of a sudden you get to see a live performance of one of the most iconic EDM tracks ever with all the people you love. Just couldn't be more exciting. That's the stuff that you, as a promoter or a fan, just dream about.
I didn't even know that happened. And I think the hairs on my arms stood up a little bit because what year was that? Because I can imagine you're grooving, you're having a good time. Maybe you've had a couple fluids, whatever. And then they roll Sia out with David Guetta and Aphrodite. Come on, man. That's ridiculous.
One of the greatest songs of all time. And it's probably like 10 or 12 years old. 15 years old.
15 years old. That's around the time when I think EDM became more pop as well. So that really had some sting. I might actually go bump that in the car when we leave. But that's
one of the things I've been observing, actually, we were just talking about it at the office this week, is almost feels like that music is having a little bit of a resurgence again. It was huge for the early part of the last decade. And then that progressive house, big room, is what a lot of the EDM people will call it. That Swedish House Mafia anchored Broadwell's Broadway music went away. I think part of it was maybe preference. It definitely got oversaturated. So I think there's a lot of people that got away from the art and were more anchored on the culture around producing music like that. But I also think COVID was really bad for them, right? That's music that you want to be outside for with your friends at a club. And it feels like we're feeling like a little rebound now. You have a lot of DJs coming up on absolute fire. You look at like John Summit, you look at Don Dalla, all fit into that radius of music.
Fred again.
Right, exactly. It almost feels like younger generation, Gen Z, that isn't so young anymore, is starting to rediscover some of these things, but curate their own acts. So that's another observation I have, and just some of the success that Ultra's had, specifically the last couple of years, in getting some of those humongous big room acts of yesteryear and tomorrow to play together.
I think in its impact to travel is the music, the gathering, the communities. More than ever, people are starting to become more aware of event travel associated to this. And I've just seen it over the course of maybe the span of this podcast, where people are like, wow, I didn't really think about that impact. But the music itself brings people together, which in turn has these live events, and people want to share that experience. They want to make it happen. And so as we start to look at the summer, one of the things I noticed on social media in particular was that Lollapalooza sold out in a day or something like that, like all 3 days, something crazy.
I think it was only a couple hours.
Yeah.
I saw some of our friends posting on Instagram about how successful they were, which you love to see. That was awesome.
Yeah, no, just absolutely amazing. And one of the travel trends that I had seen, especially for Chicago in general, it was actually up to 95 to 98% in terms of occupancy over that time period. And that's something that was reported last year, and that was already up by 2 to 3%. And so you're going to see these, they're classifying them as festival zones, right? They're able to track over these particular dates the impact that it has on at least hotel occupancies and short-term rentals. And so I think the indication of a few hours of Lollapalooza selling out is just obviously tremendous. So what do you think? Is that indicative of Lollapalooza, or does it typically take a little while for them to sell out?
Well, they do, which we used to talk about a lot.
Oh, by the way, you're from Chicago. You've been going there since you were in diapers, right?
That's right. It was my first one.
Yeah.
Calvin Harris in 2011, maybe. That was like one of my first. Yeah. I think there is a couple of things. One specific to Lollapalooza, which is, it feels like every 4 years they put out like 3 fire lineups and one that's like a clunker. And then everyone's like, they're over. And then the next year they come back with something insane, just how it was the last couple of years for them. I think the frameworks that I would encourage people to think about that are in the music travel space is have 2 ways that you could design a music travel event. The first way is using existing infrastructure in the backbone of a major metropolitan area. And so you look at some of the most successful festivals, that would be Ultra in Miami, let's say Lollapalooza in Chicago, Outside Lands in San Francisco. They have the benefit of being smack in the middle of the city. What that means is you have a much easier time with transportation. Public transit options are really good that make it easy to get people in and out. Occupancy, to Mario's point, where you have a tremendous amount of supply of hotels, Airbnbs, whatever else is permittable in that region of the world. That makes it very easy for people to travel in. You also have a supply of activities, where people could structure and build a true vacation around this. Lollapalooza is in the middle of August. It's generally very beautiful in Chicago at that time of year. Less the one day it invariably has to rain.
Humidity is a factor, I think.
And you could spend a whole weekend doing a ton of great activities in the city of Chicago and go to the festival at 3, 4, 5 o'clock every day, still 5 hours, 6 hours in use maybe, and feel like you took a proper vacation. And I think one of the advantages of those places where they build out in the Miamis and the San Franciscos and Chicagos, to continue our example, is that they can lean on a lot of that existing infrastructure to make for a desirable travel destination. Now, the converse of that point is working with any of those beautiful cities requires a lot of tact for the promoters. You look at all the teams behind those productions I just mentioned. They have decades-long relationships with municipalities. They do a tremendous amount of work to make sure that's going to be successful. Model A is lean on existing infrastructure to build out your experience, which then is going to facilitate and grease the wheels of airfare and lodging and many other things.
Including flights, by the way, because that's another piece in preparation for this, taking a look at this. Being someone who's worked with hotels for a number of years, I never really dove into flights, but even the 2024 numbers are saying that all live event inventory is being booked 15% more than previous years around these particular events. They're also classifying them as festival flights, which has also created new packages from a transportation perspective. I think the other thing that's really interesting outside of maybe Lollapalooza, which booked up so fast or was sold out so fast, is that last minute flights to major events are showing 30 to 40% higher prices in 2025 rather than, it's definitely a shift. This is a strong segment of travel that is now, because of the way that these concerts, festivals, various events create demand, it does through the entire travel ecosystem increase everything you can think of around it. So I feel like you got the transportation piece, you have the backbone, you have the infrastructure for where these festivals are going to happen. One of the things that obviously draw people, Alex, are the lineups. What was the thing about Lollapalooza that just made the difference, I think, this year?
I think one of the coolest things about the streaming generation is that it has given everybody the ability to own a lot of music and experience things they maybe wouldn't have otherwise experienced. Let's rewind the clock to CD era, which is when I grew up, or maybe vinyl era when other people grew up.
Is that a jab? Really? I'm more of a cassette CD guy.
Last year, he was cleaning out the basement. He was, hey, I have my vinyl collection. I'm going to throw it away. I was like, dude, first off, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Second off, I started going through this crazy stuff in there. The Journey, we had the Tom Cruise Top Gun original soundtrack. And the one that I was like, dude, you cannot throw away. He had Diamond Life by Sade. And he was just going to put it in the bin. I was like, Dad.
No, he can't do that. First of all, an original pressing will get you about $50, $60, right? Yeah. Like, come on, man, you got to talk to him. Put that on eBay real quick and just test it out.
The old man.
Yeah.
Your question about the lineups, because now Spotify has enabled everybody to experience things, you don't have to go to the record store to buy a record and cost 10, 20, 30 bucks, whatever it is. Once you pay that amount, you feel so obligated to listen to that record. And because you bought that record, you can't purchase a bunch of other records. And so I think that Spotify is disintermediate that. It's one of the best effects of that. And the downstream impact of that is now being seen at festivals. You look at Lollapalooza's lineup. I've been joking with everybody, them and Outside Lands this year. Just something for everyone. Yeah. There's something for everyone. You have Tyler, the Creator, and Luke Combs is the first day, which is hip hop. Tyler's on the top of his game right now, doing a massive tour. Chromacopia, I think, is done like 95 to 97% sellouts in arenas, mostly 2 to 3 per city across the U.S. Awesome show, by the way. Saw it a few weeks ago. One of my favorite shows I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. That's Friday. And Luke obviously is selling out stadiums, football stadiums last year. So he's a humongous act. Then Friday, you have Olivia Rodrigo and Korn, which could not be further ends of the spectrum apart.
Olivia is kind of punk rock. I mean, she's trying to be.
For sure. Olivia is, of all the sort of young pop girls, most likely, I think, to chase Taylor. NFL guys chase Brady. All the pop stars have to chase Taylor.
Yeah, she's now. Like alternative Taylor.
Totally. And her career is just blossom. She's doing amazing with Gen Z. Has really strong penetration with millennials as well. Then you got Korn, which is like this cool legacy act that were like alternative internet kids like Mo. And I think that's a really unique experience where a lot of people at Lollapalooza probably would have never seen that kind of music. That's one day. Then Saturday, you go to Rufus Du Sol and Twice. Again, like two totally opposite ends of the spectrum acts. Rufus, one of my favorite acts. They're probably going to be my number one on Spotify this year if they can unseat Abel or Kendrick Lamar. Like very intellectual, like upper class dance music. You got to know somebody to understand why they're so popping, but they can do stadium tour on their own, which they're out right now. And I think they sold out pretty much all their dates in their 20 stadiums. And then you have Twice, which is a humongous K-pop act, right? That's like doing their thing. And Lala's been pretty steadfast the last 3 years. They've had a K-pop anchor, which I think is really significant. When I was at the fest last year, I can't remember who they had.
Was it Blackpink?
No.
aespa, Stray Kids.
Stray Kids last year.
Yeah. I mean, I just did a K-pop superfan episode and I just learned so much, man. And also, I don't think I've mentioned this to you, but I went to South by Southwest and there was a very strong Korean tech community there, very strong K-pop. So it's clear that from a media sort of zeitgeist, right? Like it is right in there. So it makes a lot of sense if Lollapalooza is going to at least have one sort of standard anchor, because as you're describing it, man, that is 3 days of bangers.
Oh,
and I get it now.
And I think the thing about K-pop that's so fascinating is they look at it like a national export. It's creative arts, of course, but it's also business, and they operationalize it through all the camps and people that have seen the rise of some of the big K-pop acts, most namely BTS and Black, would be very familiar with that journey. And so I was appalled last year at I think it was Stray Kids and SZA were the same night, and I was obviously like, SZA is incredible. It was probably really a lot of people split. And Stray Kids emerged, they'd gone straight in, they waited at the second stage for them all night, and that was the primary reason they went to the festival. So that's moving a lot of tickets. If your seat's free and you're at Lollapalooza, that's like maybe 10% of your inventory. So it's on one act, which is incredible. And then it rounds out with Sabrina Carpenter and A$AP Rock, who feel very different, but you actually know those acts are.
Rocky headline Rolling Loud, right? Came in on a helicopter and killed it.
That's pretty cool. And Rihanna was in public, which did all that often. So yeah, I think really well-rounded there. Gen Z, millennial, good crossover. You get every single genre. So any person is going to look at that and be like, okay, there's 2 or 3 things here. So I think they took a really smart strategy. I think Outside Lands did something very similar as well, right? They have John Summit and Doja Cat. I think Tyler's doing that one.
Yeah.
Boys, you got to remember, like, you're in San Francisco, so you have a lot of granola people. So that's like a humongous get for them.
Yep.
And he's doing a tour. Anderson .Paak, Vampire Weekend, Big Legacy Acts, Glass Animals is out. Jamie XX, Gracie Abrams. So I think that one of the reasons these festivals are able to succeed is because they're not shackled by the Rolling Loud problem or the Ultra problem, which is you have to get the same acts every year because there's only so many acts. It's very difficult to create differentiation, but you do, like Rolling Loud was able to this year with Playboi Carti. You have a real cultural moment where he brings out The Weeknd and everyone's talking about Rolling.
Yeah, so you're saying that these are killing it mainly because it's not genre specific. And to the initial statement is that streaming has opened up the doors for any time. You're right, man. Like I'm bumping K-pop now. Who would have known? Because it's so accessible. Before I had to go and make a conscious decision that I was going to go buy this track or go buy this CD or whatever it is. And now you can test it out and you can sit in your car or sit in your AirPods and listen to whatever you want. No one has to hear it. Through this whole entire commentary, there's something missing. Coachella. Are you going? And what are your initial thoughts of those lineups? And of course, we're going to talk about if you are going or people are going, how you're getting there and where you're staying.
I am going. I was stretching this morning and it started to set in. I was like, this time next week, at Coachella. It's my favorite weekend of the year. I think in terms of thinking about that genre-agnostic festival, Coachella was the pioneer of that. And for years, Mr. Talib, we talked about this, I think, a little bit last time, is just so unbelievably incredible in the way that he has evolved himself. The festival has been going for 30 years now or something like that. And it started as a rock festival, very countercultural, Jane's Addiction and these types of bands. And now it's everything.
Music.
And of course, they don't always hit every single year. They have bad years, good years, like any other festival. But I think they have generally pioneered this concept that's taken many other festivals a long time. I think one interesting trend I have observed the last couple of years is that for a long time, at least for a decade, Coachella was getting acts that were impossible to get. And like the only place in the world that you could go see them was Coachella, right? They have the Guns N' Roses reunion. They have the Outkast reunion. They have Beyonce, right? They have Drake, who never does festivals. They have all of these just incredible Frank Ocean that you're like, holy shit, how did they convince those people to play together? Been on stage, I haven't been on stage in many years. Did his damn debut there. And I almost think in many ways that was a little bit of like a shackle for them because people have built up this expectation, right? The last 3 or 4 years, we've all been chasing, and they've been chasing 2 acts in particular, one named Taylor Swift, the other named Robin Fenty, aka Rihanna. So it's almost like when they don't deliver that, people are like, what the fuck's going on? And I think the last couple of years, they have alleviated themselves to some of the pressure because every act that could possibly want to play shows has been playing shows in the last few years, especially post-COVID. 1, because they want the money, but 2, because there is so much money in music and touring and festivals now that it would be unwise for any act to sit out and not do a tour. And so I think now Coachella has the ability to not feel like they have to go get somebody that hasn't played it. Because that's it's tough, right? Will Kate Bush come play? Will Adele come play? It's like, that's hard pressure to have as a team. And this year, I think they did very much the same thing that Lollapalooza did, just maybe for a little bit of an older audience. Anchor, Lady Gaga, Saturday, Green Day, Sunday, Post Malone, who could do a hip hop or a country set, probably going to do a mix of both, I assume. And then you got Travis Scott doing like the special guest thing that they have to get last few years. So if you're between the ages of 20 and 35, you are in love with at least one of those artists. And if you have a lot of common sense, you're probably and should be in love with all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The strategy is working for them. And I feel like this came up in an earlier conversation as well. It's really tough to keep things fresh, right? Like what you're pointing out is it's got to appeal to a Gen Xer all the way down to a Generation Alpha. Is that what they're calling them now? These are like my kids, right? Who are preteens and teens. And so that's another place where the K-pop thing comes in as well, right? They have this swath of fandom. How do you think they balance that? Because I feel like there isn't enough new artists that could carry the stage at this point. At least, I don't know if it's a cycle of maybe every 5 years or every 10 years where you have someone who can pack a stadium eventually. But there's this buildup to, hey, you're going to do small venues, you're going to go to a certain cap number, and then you get to amphitheaters and stadiums and so on and so forth. And the festival route allows them to have a little bit of flexibility. You have separate stages, the EDM room, that kind of thing. And so how do you think just the music industry in general are able to create the pipeline for these festivals and live events to make it happen? Because maybe it's back to the streaming thing again, but like, how do you break new artists now to where they have enough fans to support them in maybe a Coachella or any of these kind of side stages to eventually make the bet that they're going to get to the main stage and be able to carry them a good 5 years down the line? What are your thoughts?
Thoughts on this, maybe 4 or 5 parts. Dig in.
That's why I asked the question, because I sincerely was like, like I said, it came up earlier. People are like, can we keep when are you going to get the other Taylor Swift? When are you going to get the other Beyonce? Because they're going to cycle out here in a second. And especially if you start looking at the headlines, I think Billy Joel's not doing well. There's all these things where, some of these legacy rock stars or just music legends are now starting to cycle out. They're not going to be able to tour anymore.
I want to take that last point you made, and then I've written down 4 or 5 things I'm going to dig here in a second. We're in a really new era where a long time, especially pop stars, are really vicious business for young women too. I really have a lot of empathy for all of them to have to go through it because they burn very bright, but typically not for very long. So what Beyonce and Taylor are doing is transcendent, to be honest. We never really see anything like that. Madonna, as opposed to Big Kate. I think the digital age has given them new life where they're able to have a career 20 years into making music. Beyonce or Taylor Swift drops, people know, and they care. And it's really remarkable because the way that record labels used to work back when they were printing CDs and vinyls is that there was a very constrained supply resource, and they had to fight for studio time and marketing budgets. But now, besides Spotify and other big tech companies have distributed that and made it a lot easier for people to DIY or build their own brands. Taylor and Beyonce, in using the sort of most far end of the spectrum examples, don't really need to do a lot of like outbound marketing. They have humongous channels that they own primarily and can continue to drop. And so as long as they're making high quality music, or at least music that their fans love, they can continue probably to go on tour as long as they want it. It's really unprecedented territory. We were maybe 6 or 8 acts right now. Those two, Drake, Kendrick, I'm sure I'm forgetting some too, that are like a decade and a half into their career and still Lady Gaga, The Weeknd, very much Bruno Mars on top of the charts. Yep. And so to be seen, the rock stars have always figured this out. The rock bands have been on tour. Look at the Grateful Dead. They're holding up the Grand and they're selling out the Sphere every night, which is pretty badass.
Yep.
But we haven't really seen it as much in pop and hip hop. So it's one interesting development of the last few years.
Blast Music Fest brings the vibes to the Seattle Center. This July 19th with sounds that move your body and the beats that lift your soul. From Afro beats to global grooves, it's a full-day celebration of music, culture, and pure energy. Choose your experience, GA, GA+, VIP, or go big with Diamond. Lock in your spot now at blastmusicfest.com. That's blastmusicfest.com. Let's blast off together, straight to the moon. The lights, the crowd, the beat. Make this festival season unforgettable. Find the best ticket deals now at tickets.expotravel.com. Explore now. Tickets.expotravel.com.
I think rewinding to your question, though, about the festivals, I wanted to outline a couple of concepts for folks that maybe aren't quite as familiar with festival ticketing. So the way that people think about tickets in the music business is through a lens called hard tickets and soft tickets. And the way that you can think about that is an act is good at selling hard tickets if they have a show by themselves and they are able to sell it out. For example, Beyonce is playing 4 nights in SoFi Stadium in a few weeks. I am very excited. I will be at 2 of those nights to watch the Cowboy Carter Act 2. Beyonce's a hard ticket act. You could put Beyonce on a bill by herself. You could put her in the middle of the desert, on a boat in the ocean. The Beehive would go. People would buy one. Taylor Swift, hard ticket act. There's something called a soft ticket act. And so these are acts that are really popular that people like, but they probably wouldn't go out of their way to buy a ticket to this act. They certainly wouldn't travel to see this act. But if this act appeared on a bill or a festival that they were at, I'm generally very excited. So an example, one of my favorite acts that is probably more of a soft ticket act is Matt Fisher, big DJ. You're in the DJ scene, of course. Fish actually has never done a tour, believe it or not. He does one-offs, right? He did one of my favorite shows of all time was his Cow Palace set in San Francisco last year. Banger. And how cool at the iconic Cow Palace in Bay Area for folks based in the Bay. And he is able to sell that out, but he's never done a 25-city Fish tour. And most of the big DJs have not done that. They don't really typically do that. Even DJ Snake, who's probably my favorite DJ last year, usually does a festival run. Fake will come play shows and he's very good about feeding his fans. It's awesome. One of my favorite things about him. But he's not going to do an arena one run in the way that Ariana Grande might. So that's like a soft ticket act. Another example is a guy named Alex Warren, who this week I just learned about. A lot of listeners probably don't know who he is. I encourage you to go check his Spotify. I was like, who is this man? And I listened to his music. I was like, oh, I know this guy. And then you realize that there's a whole subculture of his music on a place like TikTok. And so Alex is another act that if you're his manager, you're his label, you would never put out a tour because he probably would flop it. But if he's on every festival, everyone's going to be like, oh shit, that was an awesome set. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about how you grow your act, you have to make the decision as a manager, as A&R, as an advisor, as a promoter to say, hey, we don't think you're going to have the demand there in terms of selling venues on your own, but we think you'll have an incredible festival run. You do the festival run, you expose yourself to a lot of people that maybe haven't heard your music. You also make a ton of money, right? You build the foundation to then do your own tour in the future. And so really, if you're like sort of artist manager, the nirvana is getting to a place where you have the dexterity to be able to do your own tour, hard tickets, or do a festival run, soft ticket, and you're able to do the profit maximizing thing. And vibe maximizing thing and the artistically maximizing thing by picking the mix of those two things that you wanted.
Amazing. No, that's a great explanation of how they would approach that and how they could effectively create the farm league of artists they get millions and millions of views on TikTok, but could they carry? That's another thing you can talk about. Like, they are influencers, but they're artists, but can they really sell out a stadium? Probably not. You don't really, 1 or 2 minutes of their best stuff, and then can it really sustain an entire era's tour where there's multiple albums that are coming out? Okay, that's an incredible insight. I feel like there's probably a really good mix of that at this particular Coachella or at Outside Lands. Or is there anything in particular other than, what was his name?
Alex Warren.
Alex Warren. Is he a DJ?
No, he's a singer. Music's very popular right now, man. People really like
a Benson Boone kind of vibe. Yeah.
Benson's one of the biggest acts at Coachella this year. I think the other half, because I was talking about it from like the artist side, right?
Yeah.
Talking about you're an agent. Now let's go to the promoter side. The promoter side is you need to know those acts. Like, your job is to know the acts. And the reason that Coachella has succeeded so long is that they know the acts. Mr. Tillet's main job, from what I've heard at Golden Voice, is he just knows the acts and he listens to music all day. He finds people with 4,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, and then they become Doja Cat. I think what you want to facilitate as promoters, you want to be a very artist-friendly environment. And the reason Coachella succeeds is because, one, it's the hangout, right? It's the yearly annual sort of pilgrimage for all the agents, all the managers, and all the A&Rs, which are the bosses of the artists. It feels weird that like Beyonce has a boss, but he does. And at least a person that influences how much money she makes. And all the acts want to go because they want to see each other, see their friends that make music, but they also want to catch up with all these people. And it's Coachella's responsibility to know what the pipeline is. And so, of course, they have a really strong relationship when you're up and running. You don't have cold start problem. So the managers and the A&Rs and the agents are sending you the people that they think are about to pop. Your job is to create the space for them to help them grow. And there's many acts. Sometimes I get a lineup hoodie every year at Coachella.
Of course.
Sometimes I look at the acts and I'm like, how did they get this person? So a great example is my first year I went, we saw Lil Uzi Vert, and he was at the old Sahara tent before they moved. It was much smaller, probably like half the capacity it is now. Sahara tent, for people that are listening, is like the party DJ tent. Mm-hmm. Coachella has transformed this stage over the last like 8 years into this unbelievable spectacle. The video wall in there is massive. It's the most overstimulating concert environment you could ever possibly have. So they typically put like the big DJs and the rap acts in there, and it's just a big party all week. And so we saw Lil Uzi Vert on the old Sahara stage at 3:00 in the afternoon. He actually brought out Playboi Carti, which this is back in 2017. So nobody has ever heard. Playboi Carti just put out Magnolia, and Uzi had just done EXO Tour Life. And so then last year, we are back again. So this is 2024. And Uzi is now playing the outdoor stage. And he's much bigger, and he's the last act, I think, on the outdoor stage. He's got Just Wanna Rock, and he's a humongous international superstar now. And that's a really good example of Mr. Tillet and the Golden Voice team knowing an act that was about to get big and seeing that 8 years ago, almost a decade ago, and giving him the space to grow. So when he invites them back to the festival, they have a much better space. And if you're an artist, you're thinking, oh yeah, last time they had me, put me at this whack 3 p.m. spot, but they gave me a big stage because they knew that song I did was really hot. All right, I'm going to go play it again. I'm going to say yes to their offer. I'm willing to negotiate with them a little bit, get the money right for them, get the money right for me, and I'll get to see all the homies when I come. And I think that's the experience they curate. So all the promoters at Another Planet, with Outside Lands case, C3, and Lawless case, and most certainly Coachella and Glastonbury are probably the two GOATs at this, nurture those relationships for decades. And they send everyone holiday gifts. And they know an act like Peggy Goo back in 2017, or Stormzy back in 2017, or Kanye back in 2011 before he got canceled like crazy. When it's like always giving space to these people to then grow into something much bigger and ultimately, hopefully, evolve into a headliner.
Yeah, that's amazing insight. Then you fast forward to, you said, I don't remember which year, but you've got Lil Uzi Vert and you got Playboi Carti. This week, both those guys could take the main stage, right? And kill it.
Yeah.
All day.
Like, Playboi just did Rolling Loud and crazy,
Yeah. Amazing. as we start to look at that, I think that's a pretty good roundup of some of the bigger festivals this summer season, and just some ideas of how the inner workings or the planning goes in terms of building those lineups and then understanding how that's going to impact the overall experience. When I start to think about, obviously, when we talked about this before, is travel and live entertainment, you got to talk about Las Vegas.
Sphere, baby.
You have to talk about Las Vegas, and you got to talk about the Sphere. And we know, you and I, how amazing it is to put together a travel experience. But when you go to a destination that is an entire travel experience where the venue is this iconic ball of light, they've had quite the run in Q1, right? You had Anima, you've had, obviously, Dead and Company, you've had, I think, wasn't there a K-pop group or somebody else was in there? Maybe better, but let's talk about that and what they're doing over the course of the summer that might kind of rival some of these summer festivals.
Yep. You bring up a really good concept that we should get into before we start talking about the Sphere, Mario.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's always top of mind for me is going to be incredibly poignant this year, where we have a number of humongous doing stadium runs like Beyonce, The Weeknd, Kendrick and SZA, Post Malone. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few as well. I think Kenny Chesney's doing some.
He's always doing them.
Always.
That guy's a grinder.
But the thing about the rock and the country acts, man, they just take it so seriously.
Totally.
Fans, it's really awesome. It's like totally what the whole partnership of artist and fan is about. But I think one of the things that I think about a lot is the trade-off between festivals and individual city events. And so if you're a Live Nation, you have a very gigantic market share. If you're a fan, you have discretionary income. And you want to go see some concerts. You want to see your favorite acts. And you have a pool of money that you could distribute to see your favorite acts. And there's a lot of ways that you could go about doing that. You could go about doing that by hitting a bunch of music festivals, which is what I did when I was younger in my life. And the reason I like music festivals is they're very fun.
Yeah, variety.
An insane amount of variety, that's right. You actually get really good value for money in terms of what individual tickets to see all the acts that I'm going to see next weekend at Coachella. It would cost me probably $10,000.
Easily.
You're getting very good value for money. You're getting the highlight reel. You squeeze it all into one thing. I think it's also very communal. So if you have a large group, you get to spend time. You're breaking off into small segments. It's a great way to catch up with your friends, maybe a once a year, twice a year type of thing. The downsides of a festival are they're very physically demanding, which when I was 20, care about so much. Now my friends are in their 30s and they're like, yo, man, I can't do it anymore.
It's just too dusty out here.
That's right. A lot of people, they got back paid. It's late nights. And so then you look at the other end of the pendulum, which is the individual city show. And for me, my favorite acts, the thing I get most energized about in music is the stadium acts. I think it's like the pinnacle of music and business, which is two of my favorite things. And they have an uncanny ability to bring together so many people. It's very difficult to get 60,000 people to come to one place at one time and celebrate the same. Everyone's playing for the same team. That's like a pretty remarkable concept. It's different than sports in that way, even where it's like you go to a Chargers game, half the people there, maybe not a good week, are Chargers fans. Whatever team we happen to be hosting that week. And so many people are now looking at these individual shows as almost like a substitute for the festival. So if you're a person that has maybe a budget of $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 or more to spend on concerts, you are going to allocate some to festivals maybe, and then some to these individual city shows. And the way that I see that product for me personally is it's a little less communal, right? You're like not walking around, you're maybe not spending as much time catching up with all your friends, but it can be very like deep and special, right? You go to the Eras Tour. I was in there with one of my best friends in the whole world. And I was just moved. I'm feeling goosebumps right now, just thinking about the loudness of it and the intensity of it and the veracity of it, because you knew you were at some so special. And that was a really unique experience I got to share with my friend that makes our friendship better. And so I think as a fan, you're thinking about, okay, what's my split of festivals and live concerts? And how do I balance those two things? How do I book my travel around those two things? Because maybe I would rather go see Beyonce in Glendale then going to Coachella for the weekend because I really love Beyonce. And I think Glendale's Phoenix is obviously a really cool place to be right now. And I think that's one of the challenges that Live Nation and AEG have to fight, because they almost have cannibalistic products here. They have to balance how much do we want to push. And now they have this almost this third thing in Live Nation's case in the Sphere, which is like a one-off show, has some flavor of festival because it's definitely like a travel weekend because you're going to Vegas. And it's a little unique about like how they're trying to direct traffic to each of these products, which maybe at a surface level feel, I'm going to see a concert, but are actually very different sort of emotional and financial experiences.
Sure. Not to dumb down the term, but there's the experience factor where there's more of a repeatable, enhanced experience at the Sphere versus if you, I don't know, like Michael Rapino always says, there's nothing like live, because that's why there's a premium on that ticket price, because you can never duplicate what happens at live. So I think Sphere is one, like I said, repeatable. They'll have the same type of show, same visuals to a certain degree, but you never know if the artist is going to pull someone out of the crowd and do something very unique and special versus if you're in a stadium event concert, you don't know who's going to show up on stage. You don't know who's going to go a little bit longer on the guitar solo, those type of things. And so I don't think as a fan, what do you spend your money on the experience in Las Vegas, or do you wait out to see what's going to play at MGM and see what's happening there? Because that's one market where all of this stuff competes.
Yeah.
Everything competes. So yeah.
Example of that, Mario, is on Beyonce's tour. I think all the listeners probably know I'm like honorary Beehive.
I didn't notice at all.
I had heard that they were trying to figure out a Sphere situation for Beyonce.
Oh.
I thought that was pretty well corroborated by the fact when she put her tour on sale at the end of beginning of this year, she didn't have any Vegas dates.
Okay.
And then 2 weeks ago, they finally posted the Vegas dates, which means I guess they probably hadn't been able to figure out the terms of the Sphere show just yet. And I think it's a prime example of Beyonce, in her case, didn't want to do a Las Vegas show. If she knew she was going to do 3 or 5 shows at the Sphere, then she has the friction with her team where I know the Cowboy Carter tour is going to be perfect because Renaissance was, in my opinion, the most academically impressive tour I'd ever seen in terms of the production of it. And her team's not going to do anything less than A+ work. It's very difficult to manage that experience of you're doing a whole stadium run at the Beyonce level. And also you have this project in the Sphere, which she would be the first act like that in this space. She's going to do some country stuff, but also like her R&B. She got some pop music. She's also a pop act. It's untested waters. And I think it's one of the challenges the Sphere is having right now as a team. At first, they were just booking the bands. And I think some of that was, it's just Mr. Rapino and the people around him with what they like. It's what they grew up with. And like, oh, cool. If I ran a gigantic music promoter, I'd probably book the acts that I like too. And to start out a venue like that. But then I think they kept it so sticky because they realized, one, the tickets to Sphere need to be pretty expensive for a little while for them to justify the investment that they made, which is smart. That's just business. And the demographics of the people that are accustomed to coming to Vegas for this type of thing still skew older, right? Yeah. Vegas has done a tremendous job of making the residency thing younger in the last decade. I talked about that for a little bit in our last combo. But the concept of coming to Vegas for a show and the show being the anchor and then doing some other stuff around it is like a very Midwestern mom sort of mentality. Well, parents done that many times. Yeah.
Speaking of, not for nothing, it's still a new venue, right? They're still trying to test things out. I think it's going to be really telling to see what happens when the Backstreet Boys are in full mode at the Sphere. Because then again, they're hitting another demographic, mainly Gen X, older millennials who are big fans of that particular group. And just to understand what that experience is going to look like from inside the ball is, I think I would actually like to see that. And then that sort of opens up a new set of genre because they've done like the old school. You got U2, you've got Dead and Company, you've got Fish Do It, you've got EDM, people who've done it. And so I think this is the first kind of boy band, straight up pop group that will span mainly Gen X, millennial fans. And so I think they're still trying to find what that secret sauce is because it can't be cheap to run these visuals.
Yeah, they carved out Sphere from MSG last year because it was just such a liability on the balance sheet because of all the investment that they'd made, dragging down the performance of the overall company. But they were like, no, we just bought this really expensive thing. And I'm glad you brought up the point about the Backstreet Boys, Mark. It makes so much sense. So if we think that the person that's going to go to Vegas for residency still is a little older on average, that means they can probably stomach the tickets. I always joke when Bruce Springsteen goes on sale, my friends and I always, no, we should go see Bruce Springsteen. Shit, man, it's so pricey because we're competing against our dads. Our dads are always going to be able to outbuy us. at least for the next decade or two in my case.
Yeah.
And so I think what's cool about the Backstreet Boys is they've been in this like total rock band phase for a while, which is great. Give the legacy acts their shine. Make people hopefully exposed to something that they didn't know. I'm sure a lot of younger generations are getting tuned into the Dead and their subsequent counterculture, subculture that they've created over the last 4 decades, which is pretty remarkable. So I think that's cool. And you also are sure you're going to sell for tickets. You have a pretty sure hard ticket act in this case. I think with the Backstreet Boys, it's like they haven't been out in a while. Everyone knows them. Everyone likes them. Feels like pretty, I'd say probably leans women. If your girl asks you to go to see the Backstreet Boys.
Oh, yeah. They got hits, man. Not to mention, they've sold out several cruises.
Yeah.
Which is effectively the Sphere.
That's right. Very
same concept.
A little less sexy, probably. And I think it gives the Sphere and Live Nation MSG the opportunity to figure out what it looks like to have a non-rock in there. Enima was so specific. Enima's a DJ for folks that maybe doesn't listen to Italian DJ.
Those visuals, man, I'm just like...
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so I think he had a very clear vision of how they were going to do that. But with the pop acts, it's a little less clear because a lot of the pop acts, it's about creating energy and being proximal and a little less on the visuals historically. So I think that the Backstreet Boys is a great opportunity for them to do something that it probably would have otherwise never happened. And it's great learning opportunity for the Sphere because I heard what their big project is for the fall is they're trying to get Harry Styles in there for 40 dates or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think Backstreet Boys is a really good, strong test run of, okay, here's what worked well from the bands. Here's what worked well for the pop acts. Okay, now we're going to have this massive pop star do his kind of comeback run after he's been away for a couple of years. He also ran the London Marathon a couple of weeks ago, ran like 3:30. So just one of those people that's good at everything.
Yeah, he's
so
annoying.
Yeah, for sure. Gives them the opportunity to learn a little bit and give some shine to some acts that deserve it.
This has been really interesting for a kickoff to the 2025 Summer Festival concert season with a bit of strategy and a bit of background on how all the sausage is made. No pun for Chicago people. But I'm just curious, with your last statement here, if for the most bang for your buck plus travel, which festival/concert this summer would you tell someone to go to?
Oh, this is tough.
It was meant to be.
It's a hard question. They're all great.
What would be the budget? If you're like, you know what? I worked really hard. Maybe I'm just out of college. I've got a 40-hour a week corporate kind of job. I probably make, I don't know, 50, 60K a year. I can feel good about taking one really good trip. What's the best bang for the buck?
I guess if you're under 30, it's still got to be Coachella. Mm-hmm. I think everyone should go one time to see it and know what the hype is about. You're over 30, probably either the Bay Area festivals, Atlanta, or the other one that we didn't get a chance to talk about today, but they do an incredible job of bringing together all the travel elements, is Bottle Rock in Napa.
Right.
So I think that's another really unique way of spending experience where it's like food and wine, and you have some there in the same way that SSXW or South by Southwest is, or Burning Man, where it's like a celebration and you just happen to have musical acts there playing incredible shows. So that's my answer. Under 30, got to go to Coachella. Over 30, go check out Bottle Rock.
Love it.
As we wrap up here, I just say 7 Hail Marys for me this weekend that Lady Gaga is going to bring out Beyonce and they're going to do Telephone because that's what the crazy...
Oh my gosh.
Talking about on Reddit, and the way I would ascend into the next dimension would be just magical. It would just be just magical. So pray for me.
Yeah, you definitely get to the 6th dimension after that one because that's, What other kind of possible features could show up in this lineup, do you think?
The thing with Coachella, man,
you never know.
It's always something you don't expect. So last year, no doubt, did Olivia Rodrigo, which makes sense. But not which is a couple years ago, Bad Bunny did Post Malone. it's always, because in your head, you think it's the intuitive thing, but then it's someone totally crazy. Like Travis Scott's doing the anchor on Saturday. Everyone's like, oh, it's going to be the weekend. It's going to be Cardi. It seems obvious.
Yeah. Sheeran might come out.
Yeah. And Ed Sheeran just came out for J Balvin. I saw at MSG last week.
I didn't see that. Wow.
Pretty cool. It's like, you wouldn't go, but yeah, it makes sense. They're homies. That's his boys. I'm really excited. Always something good treat. You always miss a couple too that you feel jealous about, but that's the nature of the game. And one of the beautiful parts of my favorite spring rite of passage.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Alex. We'll see you on the next one, okay?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Attention travel and ticketing innovators. Whether you're a startup disrupting the industry or an established company ready to take your distribution strategy to the next level, Expo Travel is your ultimate partner in online travel and ticketing distribution. We specialize in helping businesses of all sizes optimize their operations, expand their reach, and unlock new revenue streams. And for startups looking to grow, we partnered with top venture capital syndicates to help you secure the funding you need to turn bold ideas into thriving businesses. From refining businesses to scaling operations and raising capital, Expo Travel is here to drive your success. Visit Expo Travel today. That's xpotravel.com for a consultation. And let's transform the way the world travels, one innovation at a time. Expo Travel, because the future of travel and ticketing starts with you.